All
I
right.
mean, people just literally don't listen to fucking people.
Same. I'm people.
Care to elaborate?
Well, just like the number of people that have a super strong opinion about another person that has probably listened to a grand total of like 60 seconds of their life's work, pretty high.
Oh, that's the classic Jordan Peterson. Oh,
And
he's
I mean, the
just.
same is probably to be said of the opposite side as well, for sure.
Oh yeah, but like the one I noticed the
But
most is
Jordan
people
Peterson's
talking
iconic.
about Jordan Peterson. It's like he's a misogynist, racist asshole. Okay, where did you find that? Oh, he just is. Okay.
Oh, actually,
I think
best
the
one for the other
funniest is
side
Joe
is.
Rogan.
yeah.
Oh, I was going to say the best one for the other side is Bill Gates, but Joe Rogan's kind of the middle, isn't he? Like,
Well, Joe
people,
Rogan's the funniest because it's like he has bordering on like 10,000 hours of published content that you can go and look at. And
He's
it's
probably
like
more than
there's
that because he's got what 2,000 episodes or something. Yeah,
probably
he's
averaging 2.5 hours.
he's at 2,000 episodes, and that like he's at 1,946. But then he's also got all the MMA ones. Plus, like
Yeah,
he's
and then he's got his stand up. He's got, and obviously people record his stand up shows and his like stuff like on their phone and shit. It's like he has thousands and thousands of hours of material, and there's like, I don't know, maybe 10 clips that people have been able to like soundbite and be like, see, he's a bad person.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's kind of weird.
Jordan Peterson's not at that quite at that level in terms of like content published, but same thing. It's just okay. Where's the clip? Well, we don't have a clip. Well,
It's even if it's like you do have a clip of like a few things that you find objectionable, it's like do an honest like self audit on yourself and be like, how many times have you said something suboptimal or like quotable that was like negative in your life, and like of the thousands of hours of you like talking to people, probably like once every 3 weeks.
for a lot of
try, like,
people, it's
a
once every day.
conversation.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, if you just talk to people all the time and it's recorded and broadcast to millions of people, yeah, there's gonna be like stuff in there that's like not super great because it's like people say things awkwardly.
Yeah,
like,
and say and just like not even slip of the tongue, but something comes out they're trying to think their way through something, and they kind of flub it as they're thinking through it, and it comes out and sounds really bad, or even sounds kind of bad. Doesn't even have to be, if you just go on a racist tirade, it's like, oh, I didn't formulate my thought very well. It's like, okay, that's a different thing.
Oh,
that's a very different problem.
If you just say stop associating with black people, sometimes people take that the wrong way.
or I love Hitler.
All right, and now on that wonderful topic, we're live. So it's actually kind of related. Today we're going to be doing a little bit more of an unstructured discussion. Just given the topic is not something with a ton of, peer-reviewed papers that we can go and dig up. It's much more of a exploration and opinion piece. And today we're going to be covering the topic of basically one of the problems of the internet that is not overly discussed, but Hubbard's you're the one that came up with this idea, and I think it definitely warrants a full podcast over since we're doing it. And that is the idea that the internet brings together people who probably would never have associated in real life, and therefore they wouldn't come into contact, and they wouldn't come into conflict with each other. And the internet then facilitates that, making it, I guess, causing more conflict and more disagreement than what you would actually find without it. That's kind of the general thrust, my ignorant knowledge of the topic, or of the thesis, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess my thesis that's more or less right. Was basically like, I think like pre-internet, you had in society, you had people that, you know, you talk about like bubbles on the internet. Well, pre-internet, there was bubbles in real life, and they were like much, I would say, much stronger, right? You had like your, you know, preppy middle-aged housewife that, you know, went to some fuddy-duddy church and only hung out with other, you know, people in that exact same age group from that church as her social group, blah blah blah. It's like she knew like the only people she consistently interacted with in a meaningful way were like people that were so close to her in terms of like demographics and values and all this stuff. And like there was just like very little opportunity for her to like meaningfully interact with, say, like a I don't know, like a punk rocker, you know, early 20s male that, you know, was into drugs and, you know, fuck the establishment mentality. Like those two groups like rarely ever came together in any way. And then now, like on the internet, those people are all like blended up together in like social media, and like they don't necessarily always interact directly, but they can, and they do, you know, on places like Facebook or Reddit or whatever, where everyone's just kind of blended together. And they also then get like a lot more exposure to each other's like cultural groups and like, or like culture and like values and communication kind of thing. Like, you know, like some, you know, lady, quote unquote Karen, being a Karen on, you know, and gets like shared all over TikTok, and then people like, oh well, that's like how this person interacts. And I just think like that's part of the reason there's so much like polarization and like animosity between people on like the political realm. Just because, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'd say this is something that instantly clicked as soon as you said it, but I had never explicitly thought of it before. And it really simply explains, I think, why there's so much hope for the internet back in the good old days when no one had the internet to know how bad it was yet. Because you didn't know how rough it was going to be when you got out of those social bubbles that had encapsulated you in your entire life, and nobody knew. And then all of a sudden, the entire game changes. And I think definitely in the last like 15 years, with especially Twitter, I would say, at least from my perspective, seems like the craziest one, because everything's public, and there might be some way to be private, but nobody that I know of uses a private version or private things on Twitter. It's all public, and anyone can see any tweet. And if you become famous in 10 years from now, people can go through your tweet history. It's just crazy how out in the open everything is. And that just certainly did not exist before the internet.
Well, I think like part of the reason I think my thesis is like a lot of the communities and like early internet felt like a lot different than they do now, because I think in the beginning you had like quite a bit of similarity between the people that were like early adopters of like internet and online, basically living online more or less, right? Like
Yeah.
it was like a certain type of person that was like, you know, generally like an introverted kind of nerdy person that withdrew into the internet in the early stages. But now that everyone's online, especially with like mobile devices, and like people are online all the time constantly, everyone has an online life, and that's where you really started to see all this like division and like group animosity. And like I think that like it just seems to coincide with like when everyone came together, like before everyone came together, and it was just like a particular type online. It didn't seem to matter. It was kind of like the utopia that, you know, early internet people had dreamed about, more or less.
I always imagine that that was at its peak when almost everyone on the internet was going to college. It's like all college educated or receiving a college education, all nerdy memes. Interest in computers when almost nobody was. Like,
I wanted to pick up on something that you're saying there, Price. You know, like you were saying that it was kind of like a utopian vision of the internet, and it was facilitated because people, you know, they only really had their own social circles, and they thought, oh, this, you know, it'll be just kind of like this, but with, you know, connecting with more people. I think the other problem there is the fact that you have, when you're in face-to-face conversations, even if you are meeting somebody who is not a part of your social circle and who you might clash with pretty heavily with, in a face-to-face interaction, you're probably not going to be that confrontational. You might, head out later on in the later on in the day, and you're like, oh, that guy's kind of a prick. But you don't actually typically human beings aren't going to interact with each other face-to-face in a really negative fashion. And so I think a part of the problem with the internet is once you anonymize it and then you're being exposed to the different people, it becomes just so much easier to be a dickhead about everything, right? If you have a conflict with someone, you can just start calling them names and whatnot when you're behind your keyboard comparatively to if you're face-to-face, right?
I agree. I just think I think that's like almost like a side issue to this thing, because like the thing that I see with this is actually like people who aren't anonymous, like this being the biggest almost problem with, like when I was talking about like things spreading virally on TikTok, it's like people will take like the worst example of the subculture that they dislike and then they'll spread it everywhere, and it's like not an anonymized version, right? Like it's a, I guess in a certain sense it's anonymous and like you don't really know the person, but like it's not, people aren't usually generally grabbing faceless comments or whatever. They're usually grabbing like pics, videos or actual tangible examples of people doing stuff and then just spreading it through online, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to throw in was I think it'd be a little naive to think that there weren't as many negative interactions in real life before the internet as there is now. But the way those negative interactions get shared on the internet as sort of a gotcha or a talking point. Oh, look how bad this group is. Look how bad that group is. Look at this video. This is what they're all like. It definitely just could not have existed without the internet. Like in the worst case scenario, the news could do something like that once in a while,
or a little bit more than once in a while.
Well, but they didn't have cell phones. Like even if
That's
the news
true.
wanted to go out and capture something that was a horrible example of violence, they had to do it with a real camera.
You just didn't have the examples.
Yeah.
Just not because they weren't there, just because.
Well, even they weren't compelling enough to enough people. Like I think that's a big problem. Is like there's like a lot of the things that get spread are just like people being themselves or like relatively normal, but they're just from like a completely different subculture. So that behavior is seen as like, repugnant and evil in another, or, in a different subculture. So then you have like people grabbing videos of it and examples of it, and like whole communities spring up just to like attack this type of behavior. Like you have, just trying to think of examples, but like one that springs to mind is like the child-free subreddit on Reddit. Like it's like a whole subreddit dedicated to being child-free, but what it's like turned into is basically we hate kids subreddit. And they'll literally just post like kids doing normal kids behavior that is totally socially acceptable, and they're like, see, these kids are like evil and they ruin lives, and like how could I have an independent existence if I had one of these?
How can I get drunk
around?
every night with these, like having responsibility to take care of another living being?
Well, and it like devolves into like a hate community centered around like just literally normal human behavior, but like like the news wouldn't be capturing those videos and they wouldn't be sharing it online, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't, and
That's...
nobody would be able to go out and like find a collection of other people that are like deranged to hate kids so much that they make it like their primary personality trait, right? Like, and then I think that it just gets out of hand.
I now want to know if there was ever a group that got together and hate watched America's Funniest Home Videos and complained about how these American families are just horrible.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably at some point. There's probably
but it was very local. You didn't really
exploiting fucking.
And like a lot of those America's Funniest Home Videos had to be staged. Like the kids were doing what the parents told them, running around with firecrackers or whatnot.
Exploiting their children for views. Yeah, Exactly.
Who? Nobody would do such a thing.
Yeah, that definitely hasn't gotten worse.
Well, I think I like another thing about that I was part of this thesis or idea was just so much of like people's communication styles and like what they find funny and like humorous and whatever is very particular to their like subculture, and then that just turns that just like causes a bunch of conflict online, not for any like substance issues, right? Like it's not about like the content, it's about the form that it's communicated in. It's the medium or
The style.
the style, and like you see that a lot with like people get like legitimately they're I think like 80% of like the edgy anti-Semitism online is like 14-year-old boys who think it's funny, right? Like it gets people going, so they share it and they meme about it. And it's like I guarantee you 95% of those people are not going to grow up to be, huge anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish hate mongers. They're going to grow out of their like edgy 14-year-old humor and move on with their lives. But then you have like people like, oh, see, like like the world's devolving into like some cauldron of anti-Semitic hatred, and like we have to put a stop to the misinformation and malinformation online, otherwise we're going to descend into another Fourth Reich, and like it just gets super over exaggerated because like a middle-aged boomer can't tell the fact that like someone making a Jew joke
4chan exists.
Yeah, or like someone making a Jew joke as a 14-year-old boy is not actually like deeply anti-Semitic. They're just edgy, and it's like they'll grow out of that. And it's like so many kids had that phase when they were younger, and again,
yeah,
like,
especially like young boys. That's a part of their maturation process is
part of our
being
culture
complete
is to hate
shitheads.
Jews, okay.
Yeah, and I guess it almost like pulls the roof off a lot of these things that were before were just kind of like left in their own place. You know what I mean? Like, do we really need to like have an over analysis of like 14-year-old boy humor? Like, I just
I cannot imagine a bigger waste of time for most people.
Well, it's like they're pushing the boundaries and like being intentionally offensive because that's like what you do at that age to like figure out where the boundary is, and B, it's just kind of fun to get a rise out of people and make them overreact. And that's exactly what everyone online does, or like a lot of like there's again another subculture online that is like hypersensitive to this type of stuff, sees that and like, oh my god, it's a threat to democracy, and then like freaks out. And like the best reaction to that type of humor is just to ignore it. They'll stop doing it if you ignore it. But now that there's like,
if they're not getting a rise out of you, they don't. That was Ray William Johnson in the early days of YouTube had a whole video on that. It's don't feed the trolls.
That should just be mandatory education. I don't know when kids get their first iPhone these days, probably like grade 2 or 3, and teach them about not feeding trolls. And then next year they can learn about hiding their power level.
Well, and just like even the lingo, I just you see like you'll have like mainstream media news articles coming out with like how to tell if your son is alt-right in the alt-right pipeline, and it's like lingo to watch out for. And it's just like, no, he's just part of like 90% of the time he's just part of like some regular group of boys being boys, pretty much. And it's like just
but again, just so you know, Hubbards, boys being boys is code for actual alt-right behavior.
Anti-Semitism, at least.
Anti-Semitism, misogyny, it's all the same now. Boys being boys is... we have to reclaim that term.
Well, exactly. Like there would be another group of people that will say that, and then that just like, gives fuel to the people in those groups. Like, see, they're look how out of touch and boomer and idiotic they are, that they think like A, that we're like super serious, and B, that like it's some sort of conspiratorial alt-right pipeline. Like it just
Like,
feeds
do
off
it
each
more.
other.
Yeah, exactly. Do it more. Like, they think
Exactly.
we're a
Like
part of
we're
the
getting the
alt
vibes
right.
we
Okay,
want.
do it even more.
We're getting the exact reaction we were looking for. Like, keep going, and then it just spirals.
I think a good real life example of this is the sort of Reddit 4chan divide, where Reddit will have whole subreddits devoted to making fun of 4chan and how crazy they are. And to my understanding, there are people on Reddit that will go on 4chan and post something that's a caricature of what a 4chaner they think a 4chaner would say, because Reddit thinks it's funny that 4chaners say this, and then take a screenshot of it and put it on Reddit to then laugh at the 4chaners in order to just get attention. Like, these sort of different cultures are so close to each other, and yet they, on the face of it, they all claim to hate each other. But it's a very weird phenomenon where people are just addicted to the attention. I guess it's not weird, but on the internet, it's like that's over everything. You always have to wonder like what the upvotes are, or the positive attention, or the responses. If the person gets nothing, they're not going to keep doing it.
Yeah, and I think just like going back to like the substance things, like I think there's again like so much like of the political like discourse that is like super heated online ends up like not being about substance. It ends up about being about style, and like, oh well, you say things in a way that I find offensive, or whatever, and then like nothing gets like meaningfully discussed, because like these groups just don't have the same language. And especially online, it just, because there is like bubbles, people then do tend to like kind of double down on their like group.
Oh, the most
style.
iconic thing to use in any discussion on 4chan, and I would assume Reddit, but I'm not certain. I think Americans in general find this objectionable, so it's used online all the time, is Latinx. People use Latinx just to get a rise. They'll say something completely innocuous and then throw Latinx in there, and they'll get 100 responses. It's like, work here is done. Thread derailed. Conversation over.
And there's like a whole bunch of like those trigger words depending on which group you're trying to, or yeah, where like the conversation is going on, right? Like, it just, or jokes too. Like the jokes is a huge one. Like, so much of like the edgy humor that I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. It can go too far or whatever, but like it's just like there's this, each kind of group has their different tolerance for different types of humor. And then humor obviously is going to get thrown into the conversation a lot of the time, and then it's just like, if that type of humor, if you find it offensive or whatever, you're just going to like shut out everything that person and that group is saying, because like you find their humor objectionable, and it's just like then it's not going to be any middle ground or any meaningful discussion. And
there's even meme wars about how bad each side's humor is.
Yeah,
There's the left can't meme and the right can't meme. I'm pretty sure those are both subreddits, and they constantly make fun of each other's sense of humor.
Yeah,
it's like, no, both of you cannot meme except for like a tiny fraction.
Yeah, and there's a subreddit that's devoted to, it's called I think it's called Terrible Facebook Memes, and it's literally just people that go on Facebook and go on their like family and friends' Facebook accounts trying to find like memes that they don't like and they think are bad, and then post them on Reddit.
Oh, this is another guaranteed gotcha, is if you put an iFunny watermark on any meme, even if it's not from iFunny, people will be livid.
Yeah, then it loses its legitimacy as a meme.
Yeah, because it was on iFunny, and we hate iFunny here.
No, it's a good way to just start derailing a meme that you don't like.
Well, you can't do it that way, but if you made it yourself, you could pretend it was from iFunny, and people would hate you for it.
I don't know what you think about this, Con. Like, this is related to your anonymous point. I think part of the tie in the anonymous factor into this is like, I think in real life, you also just like, you like code switch, or I don't know what the fucking term is, but I think it's
that's the right word.
Code switching or whatever based on like the demographic you're talking to, and you can do like a pretty easy using those evil stereotypes. You can use like most people can have a conversation. Maybe it won't be a super deep conversation, but they can make a conversation with someone that's like in a completely different subculture or group or whatever, and they can code switch or kind of like change up their demeanor so that the conversation goes smoothly, just based on like the visual cue of what kind of groups those people belong to, right? And then you can use body language to like ease your way into like finding a common ground between the two people, in terms of like where you guys can meet in the middle in terms of like where you're comfortable bringing the conversation, given that you're from completely different kind of walks of life or whatever. Whereas online, like none of that happens.
You can't pick up on the vast majority of human cues, right?
And you
just don't
really
exist.
Is the person a troll that's like pretending? Are they legitimate? Like it's just there's so little like ability to like delve into the person's details in a lot of these forums that it just becomes like, oh well, like I'll just act the way I do around like my closest compatriots, and if they don't like it, well, fuck them. Like it's whatever. Like they need to learn how to adapt to me, not I them. And like I'm not gonna change the way I'm talking to them. Like and then just like kind of like a default hostility, with no ability to like find a middle ground between the two people, because there's nothing to like signal who they are or where they could find that middle ground.
I feel like the closest compatriots, because people don't actually have real life friends anymore. It seems like the norm these days is your closest compatriots are your Discord group, your main Discord group. Maybe it's got a couple hundred people in it, and you all hang out and jerk each other off about whatever you think, and you decide on the right way of thinking, and then you go out into the broader culture war to fight evil.
See, you say that, and I would say that's true for like maybe around our age group and like a certain predilection of personality, but like there's lots of people who spend a decent amount of time online who would be like, Discord, what in the fuck is that?
Yeah, they couldn't do voice chat. That's too scary.
Or just like they're a boomer.
A few people on Discord do voice chat, but it's mostly for the like confined chat room that has people who can. You have somebody who can kick out anybody who's false flagging to show up in there.
Well, yeah, it's like I'm just saying, like there's like, because there's so many people online, like there's a huge chunk of the world that wouldn't even know what Discord is, like boomers that spend all their online time on Facebook on their phone. Yeah, that's right? True. Like, and again, like that person who's like spending most of their time on Facebook is going to run into someone who is a Discord addict, and like vice versa. Like it's just there's just.
I think
so
we
much
might be able to draw a line there. If you use Facebook, you don't use Discord, and vice versa. Generally speaking, Facebook is so dead in our demographic and younger, I believe.
True. I mean, there's
you might go on the wage war.
But there is like, again, like that the problem becomes there's so many people that will cross pollinate just to inflame things, and like because there's such an incentive to like spread.
Well, like what would, as I understand it, say somebody said something really stupid on Facebook publicly, then somebody would post that on Twitter. It would go viral on Twitter, and then people would go onto Facebook to attack the person directly who posted the thing they saw on Twitter.
Yeah, like when you shoot a dog thinking it's a husky.
I'm not sure if Facebook has gotten better at displaying things publicly, because I don't use it. But like Twitter definitely seems like the way to get your personal army going to fight the war.
Reddit also does that. Like I was saying, like there's a lot of stuff that, although Reddit's better, I think, about having no doxing on posts and stuff. But it still happens.
Twitter just loves doxing. I'm pretty sure they're technically anti-doxing, but even before Musk, I don't think that was enforced very quickly. And after Musk, nothing is enforced quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know Musk was like going harder on location doxing just because it's private jet, but I don't.
Oh yeah, I mean that would make sense. But in terms of like doxing people's profiles, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
that's.
I don't know. I don't know if that's changed at all. Like, I don't know. Didn't spend a lot of time on Twitter pre-Musk or post-Musk, so.
I spent more time post Musk. Just had to join it because it was in the news so much. Hate to see it.
Yeah, you got to be a part of that group that makes up all those additional racist comments.
I mean, I'm not one of them, but I mean, my compatriots probably like the people like me are probably in that group.
Well, one of the things that was revealed about that is it was a lot of bot activity, like just a very tiny number of accounts that just started flooding the site with a bunch of racist shit to damage Musk's ownership.
Well, I think that's this is the crux of why bots on the internet are so worrisome, because their sole goal can be just to inflame these existing tensions, and the tensions are springing up everywhere. And I don't know how you do it, but say you found some post that was rage baiting, then you just got 1,000 bots to like it. All of a sudden, it's viral, and now everyone's seeing it, and everyone's being enraged against that group.
That definitely happens. And I mean, to be fair, like there's also like government intervention in that. We saw like China and Russia.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like any state actor wishing to sow discord in another country domestically can do a lot of damage on the internet.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's an ever-present problem now.
The new Cold War against China needs to be started off by the U.S. government buying out Twitter and shutting it down.
Honestly,
so
not a bad idea.
Like we've looked at the options for fighting the Chinese. This is definitely best bang for buck. Shutting the shit down right now.
TikTok comes second to Twitter. Twitter's the problem.
Twitter is the problem for sure. Like, I don't know. Twitter's like
TikTok's just making people dumber. Twitter's causing tension.
I think the problem with Twitter is like the type of person who spends time on Twitter is the problem. Like you have actually like important people.
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to say. It is. Price, you pointed this out that when you were looking through tweet threads with like some journalists that they were getting riled up by the people liking and saying things to them. I think this was for the convoy, right? And it was just bots. Like it was bots like driving their, getting them riled up in a particular way because they thought it was like legit people.
Yeah, I mean, you can't trust anyone on Twitter who doesn't have a blue check mark, and a blue check mark is a sure indicator that you're a real person who's an idiot. So can't trust anyone on Twitter. But it was so bad before Musk. I haven't actually gone on to like major news media and looked at responses to posts now that he brought in the blue check for anybody. But I can only imagine it helped because it couldn't have gotten worse. It's like the assumption that everyone on Twitter is a real person was insane.
5% max bots.
I know. Should have been a 20 billion discount for that.
There's one guy, and obviously it's not Twitter. It was on 4chan, and one guy on like a side project that he was interested in doing posted 10% of the comments on poll for a week with just 10 bots.
Yeah, and imagine if you had the U.S. government's fucking resources at your disposal.
Yeah, it's just this is one guy probably spent under $500, and he could make AstroTurf 10% of one of the most notorious,
and probably one of the most influential. I would say that poll actually has real cultural influence.
I don't know, I don't know how to judge that. It definitely feels like it does, but I mean, it's hard to know. So it's certainly the most influential of 4chan. It is for most people that is synonymous with 4chan.
That was one of my thoughts. It's like if you were a rich person, even just a millionaire, and you wanted to just run publicity or you had a pet project or whatever it was, you could just buy a bot network and just spam the shit out of a bunch of different social media sites. Like I'm sure like a ton of the social media
Or
influencers already do that.
you could just be such a loser that you just do it
Just
yourself,
get 5 different
and
phones.
you try to get Bayhorse Silver to pump, but
Based. Man, going on SMG and shilling random stocks with the boys, always a good time. Like, the best part is when you think everyone's shilling it as a bot, and you're like, but I'm not a bot, but I think it's funny, so I'm going to also shill it. And then you wonder how many of the other people are doing that, and then you wonder if there are any bots there.
that's good lord. Well, I mean, there's definitely what's the more popular one version of that is like the GameStop. That
Yeah.
subreddit is still like going strong with thousands and thousands and thousands of people, but there's also a ton of bot activity in that one. Obviously, there's
Pump and
huge
dump
financial
games.
incentive.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's tons of financial incentive for the shorts.
You
to
know Goldman Sachs has a bot army just fucking lurking
manipulate
there.
that shit, and it's like,
Downvote it all. Downvote it.
well, honestly, I don't know. I haven't followed it that closely, but it seems like surprisingly, it seems like retail is losing.
I don't know. I thought retail had all the power here.
It seems
Shocking.
like for some reason that the Citadel had a bumper year, best ever. I'm could be fleecing retail investors that are delusional, but I don't know. I'm not.
Man, that's actually the big brain maneuver by Citadel and probably others, is once they realized how easily influenced retail investors were, just like pump and dumping on Wall Street bets.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Once they
Because that's how you really get back at them. Like, the GameStop ship has already sailed, but you get back at them by stealing the rest of their money.
yeah.
Which turned out to be not that hard. It's not a tricky thing to do when you have like all the knowledge and you're going against bleak.
The absolute
A
worst
person
one
with an
where
iPhone and an app and $1,000.
unbridled bot posting is stock twits, if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
Like, it's so bad. It's like nonstop commenting on a stock that might trade, I don't know, a penny stock that trades 100,000 units in a day or something, but somehow it's got a million comments on it telling you it's going to the moon.
Oh, there was actually a podcast that got in this like group of 5 guys that got busted and charged with securities fraud over pumping penny stocks.
Oh, I heard about that. I didn't look into it, but
last few months or
seen in
last year,
passing.
over the last year, it was like, yeah, it was pretty interesting. But I mean, bringing that back to like the thesis that we were talking about, it is interesting. Like Wall Street Bets, for example, I think that is like a great example of a community that has a very particular subculture, and they have like the lingo. Like the big one on Wall Street Bets was like everyone's retarded, right? And then when Reddit banned retarded for being offensive, everyone was regarded. Like it just shifted. Like, but again, it's like people were legitimately like getting all like riled up and offended that these group of people was like calling each other retards and
you just can't have fun on the internet. It's
autistic.
basically.
Oh, well, again, these guys are having fun. That's their version of fun, and they're all having fun. But then you have like, you're basically your nosy Karen that sees this on the front page of Reddit and is like, oh, they say mean words to each other and that's offensive. What if a retard figured out how to work a computer? They'd be very offended. And it's like, then they like go and tell the admins shut it down. It's like, like it's just. They're not necessarily have any issue with the substance of the subreddit. They're just like mad that this group is like saying things.
It says one word that they don't like.
Using offensive language has got to be the best tried and true gatekeeping method to have ever existed. It's like, whoever came up with that, probably the early days when the internet started expanding out of colleges, but they were a genius.
Well, yeah, like it is like a method people use to like try to get people to stay out of their community, right? But I think the ethos of the internet has like kind of gone in the favor of like using, site power or government power or whatever to like basically force the issue to make everything like sanitized enough that quote unquote everyone can participate in these
yeah.
bigger groups.
There's a whole meme about that. I'm not sure where it originated. But it was basically nerds go off and create a space for themselves because they don't like the normies, and the normies told them, if you don't like us, go make your own space. Then the normies invade that space, and then they kick out the nerds, and then the nerds make their own space, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, that's why you have to gatekeep and never break. Otherwise,
Gatekeeping is so underrated.
I've seen a lot of communities just be completely destroyed. Yeah, well, like all of the the nerd subculture for all sorts of things. Like the big, I know it's a little off topic, but the big offender of this is the woke shit, right? The second it kind of comes into anything, if you don't gatekeep immediately, like you're just gonna lose it.
I guess that's kind of, it antagonizes these divides we're talking about, because gatekeeping basically means that you're drawing the line where you and another group differ, and you're making that into a firewall, and you're exacerbating that line so that the other group won't come over, and then the other group gets upset about it.
Yeah, I'd add the other process that I think is like more common, because a lot of these are private businesses. It's like the private business starts off as the cool place to be, because it's like some founder that has a good idea and a cool idea, and then they want to cash out. Then they want to monetize it, and then as soon as the monetization comes in, then it has to be sanitized for advertisers, right? You can't have some guy on, Facebook spamming, the N word and like calling people faggots and posting a bunch of porn 24/7. It's just like, it's a bad look for advertisers, so they have to be like, okay, let's make it uncool again, and then everything, and then it starts with like the easy to, that I'd say stuff like that most people are not too objected to, like cutting down on the slurs and all that stuff, but then it slowly clamps down and clamps down.
Yeah, exactly. Then the slur category starts expanding, and then it has to be more inclusive, and then that always just turns it into a gray porridge of just boringness.
Well, and the worst part is no erotic roleplay anymore.
I think we're in different groups. I think I'm gonna have to take the concept that we've been talking about and apply it to this conversation.
Yeah, you just wouldn't get it, Once they take that from you, it starts with the slurs, and then they come for your erotic roleplay, and then it's like, why am I even here? Then you go to Discord,
and then you get banned for using the word idiot.
Then you make a new Discord account. Like, in this day and age, if you haven't had half a dozen Discord accounts, you haven't been doing much on Discord.
Yeah, you gotta have burners.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Discord is designed to allow you to have burners so that they can say they're really strict, but then they obviously aren't really strict because they let everyone have as many burners as they want.
Well, that is that's also like Reddit policy, YouTube. Like, a lot of them are like that, right? It's like, but
Google,
I think
last time I tried to make a Google account, wanted my phone number. I'm not sure if it was for sure needed my phone number.
Yeah, it does now because of all the fake accounts, right? Like all of the spam accounts.
Like, I like to have a couple accounts in my pocket,
I
have 3 Twitter accounts. Like,
I tried making a new Google account with like my real name, everything, and I wanted to link it to my phone number. I was like, yeah, that's fine. It's like, this is because I have multiple accounts for different reasons. Good reasons, of course.
Buying steroids.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I actually have like multiple accounts linked to the one phone number that I have, and they fucking banned the account even though I had like YouTube Premium on that new account. They're like, oh, suspicious activity, and they did nothing to. It's like, I had to cancel my credit card because I couldn't get through to the chat.
And Google's here I am full. With Turkish YouTube Premium, no ban. Thank you.
Based.
Oh, man.
They're cracking down on Argentinian YouTube Premium, but they haven't come for the Turks yet.
I was considering Argentina, but it was like 80 cents a month more, so.
Oh, that's crazy. I guess Turkey's gone crazy in the last bit, but Argentina's the famous one from back 2 years ago when I was looking into it.
Yeah, Argentina was the GOAT, and then Turkey was like, yeah, let's fuck up our economy way and then have an earthquake, and then things will be cheap.
Erdogan, I believe, is the name of the
Good one.
president there. It basically said, no cap, for real, that the problem with inflation was that there wasn't enough money in the economy,
Yeah.
and you solve inflation by putting more money into the economy.
It's like Canada, like they did that.
Exactly. They
Yeah,
must.
he's actually-
They're probably all WEF agents.
He's in the same group with Trudeau. They went to the same high school, little known fact.
They talk to the same Schwab.
Yeah, we're ranging a little bit off topic, but
No, it's all on topic. I don't know. Yeah, there you go. For real, no cap. Another subculture that.
Oh man, that's getting adopted though. I don't know if it's getting widely adopted, but boomers and millennials are just throwing out the Zoomer code words now when they learn them. So you never know who's the Zoomer anymore. Like, have you guys heard of Riz?
Maybe.
Oh, you're not gonna like it. It means charisma, but you can't say the full word charisma, so you just shorten it to Riz.
That guy is Riz.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
so
my
glad I'm
God.
disconnected
I don't
from the
like
younger
it.
generation.
I had to learn this, and now you do too.
I can firmly say I don't like it. I do not enjoy that particular piece of. And see, like this is the thing, like that.
Now we're being
I
the
was talking
judgmental
about-
assholes.
Well, yes, a substance over form. It's like the form you just discussed there makes me consider genocide. So.
Genocide of the Zoomers.
Like we can have like just a 20-year age gap where there's no humans that like, are from that. It's like, oh yeah, like
Yeah, the Zoomers
you
aren't productive
explain-
anyways, so.
Explaining to future historians, yeah, it's like, yeah, that gap there is like it wasn't working out. Like
Then you just explain Riz to the
Yeah,
like in the
exactly.
history books, and they're like, oh, it totally makes sense why they did that. Like, okay,
it's like some 95-year-old guy like walking on a cane, just like, did you hear about Riz?
he gets beaten to death on the street after explaining it.
It's like his World War II story.
In the biblical times, where you got a prophecy and then you killed all the firstborn children in your whole country because one of them was going to take you down. But in modern era, you just hear about Riz and then you kill all the Zoomers that you can find.
Oh my god, that's actually honestly like people like always talking about generations. Like, I feel like everyone slept on Gen X, and I like spiritually identify with Gen X. Not fucking.
Well, the thing is, everyone sleeping on them was why they're so good, because they weren't offensive.
Yeah, it's just like
Just
Zoomers,
plodding
millennials,
along.
boomers all kind of suck, like bigly, and Gen X, yeah, don't have much. bad to
I'm
say.
glad we're just demonstrating exactly the problem we're talking about.
Well, that's why it's a problem. Like, honestly, like if you think about it, it's because it's a real thing that is.
Yeah, you don't
applicable to real life
actually
as well.
if you really have like a disconnect with that other group, right? And it is
Well, it's
like you said, a real thing.
It's like if your mom invited you to like go hang out with her church friends that are all in their 60s and 70s, you'd be like,
How about no?
I'm gonna say
Miss me
no.
with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a no on that one. That's a big fat no. And like, it's just like, what are you guys gonna talk about? There's, and like, or you go to some sort of like mixed age party, unless you like break off with like your crew, it's just not. It's not. A lot of the time, it's not that great. Like, it's just like you're making jokes that the other people don't get or they find offensive or whatever. I don't know. There's just kind of like a lot of
In that respect, it almost also feels as though the modern world has less, the contemporary world has less common ground than previously with the amount of content that is created and consumed. Because if you're in, say, the 70s and you're in a mixed age group, if you watched movies, which you might not because you're old and you don't like movies, but if the old people would watch movies, they're probably watching the same movies you were because they're at the same theater you were, because there weren't any other options to watch movies. Whereas now it's like, if they don't have the same streaming service you have, you're already off to a bad start. And then on the same streaming service, you're probably still not watching the same stuff.
Yeah, it's like, I only enjoy eclectic CGI generated or no CGI AI generated Seinfeld episodes. Like,
Man, imagine trying like, oh, you like Seinfeld? I watch Seinfeld all the time on Twitch. Like,
yeah, like,
Oh yeah,
that's true. Like that, there's they're like people delve into their own little worlds more, and then when they come together, they're forced to come together like more too, though. So that
Yeah.
they're like more polar. Oh, well, that's what I was saying. Like they're more polarized, and then they're like forced to interact with each other, which doesn't make it better because they're not interacting in a healthy way. I think going back to Khan's point about like anonymous interaction and just like the online environment being bad for that, like, and then they get even more like resentful of each other. Like it's like a recipe for disaster, essentially, like the way the
Then
online world works.
they dive further into their own bubble, spend more money on the media that's made to appeal to that bubble. There's more media made to appeal to that bubble. The bubble grows and gets deeper. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I like the. It's like the worst possible world. It would be so much better if everyone stayed in their bubble.
Yeah, just don't bring the bubbles. The echo chambers are fine. Just don't bring them together, because then you get the
Don't
feedback.
entertainment, guys.
Because then people would just like not have a reason to hate each other because they would not like if, especially if you only brought the quote unquote bubbles together in like real life. Like people still get along in real life. Just
Yeah,
fine,
that's
more or
exactly
less.
what I was saying earlier, right? It's like
It's just
even
they're
they're not
forced to
gonna
interact online.
yeah, when they're interacting in person, they'll still usually have a somewhat of a veneer of decency, and you can see the human, and so you might disagree with what they say and the way that they approach certain things, but usually you're not going to come off being like, I absolutely hate this person so much, right? Which is very easy to do when you're just doing your shitty little internet groups.
Yeah, so I guess that'd be like the kind of 3-step process that I was getting at with these. It's just like people in their bubbles getting very, deep into there and polarized, and then they forced to come together, which makes them even like resentful and more polarized, and they're like also like not interacting as much in person, which would help. Like because in person is just, I think in person interaction with people who are not like you is actually beneficial.
Yeah, that's where
the reverse is true online, where online interaction with people who are not like you.
It's not to say that like there's no positive interactions between people online who are of different groups, and some common understanding can occur in some like proper human connection, but a lot of the time I would say on average it just really is not. On the whole, it's much more negative.
I'd say yeah, it's on average negative given like the current online environment, which is just like a lot of the money's to be made in like negativity. Like there's all sorts of other reasons that the current online environment tilts towards that negative bias, right? But for whatever reason, that's the reality we have is online interactions between disparate groups or different groups are generally just not good. They don't lead to positive outcomes.
It's funny that you can go on some areas of the internet where it's often violent, and the thing that will get people the most riled up is trying to respond to them in a polite fashion. They'll just get angrier and angrier for sure.
Well, yeah. Well, it's again like coming back to some of is it a troll? Right? It's like one of the best ways to troll people is be polite.
Yeah, exactly. Like people cannot like it. Just people are so unfamiliar with it now on the internet that they can't code switch to a polite conversation over the internet. That just doesn't exist. Does not compute.
True. I don't know. I don't really have much else to add, and I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. Feeling like we covered that pretty well, actually.
I'm sure we'll think of something we could have said afterwards, as is often the case, but it seems pretty good. The one thing that's come to my mind, throwing an analogy out there, is kind of picture it almost as the sort of nation state period of Europe, and you had all these nations and all the people were just propagandized with radio and newspaper to hate the other countries. And then, by now, I think most people don't have these strong, well, okay, most European countries don't have as strong of animosity towards each other. They don't believe the government propaganda, and the government propaganda generally doesn't exist, that the other countries are full of devils. But I think there could be some sort of benefit to that analogy, or at least thinking of history. That's kind of what I'm seeing. Is you have these bubbles, but instead of countries, they're now culture, or like they're much smaller, but they're cultural. And then you just fed the propaganda that the other groups are bad, and then that propaganda is such a way that it is reinforced by interacting with the other groups.
Yeah, and there's not really any like there's like no evidence you can really be marshaled to like reverse your opinion, right? Like it's kind of set up in a way that's like self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's like,
yeah, like maybe there'll be something equivalent to the First and Second World Wars that makes people realize these country things aren't so big of a deal. But we'll see. Yeah, it probably would be pretty nasty if there was a cultural war on that sort of exchange level.
I think it would be a lot lamer. The online culture.
Oh, I mean, yeah, hopefully it'd be lame. Well, actually, that was the one thing that you had brought up as sort of tangentially related to this, is that culture war bleeding, maybe not bleeding off of online into the real world, but I mean, to some extent it is. And then to another extent, the real world is just going crazy too, of its own accord. But America is getting incredibly, partisan. Incredibly partisan. And at least one of the Republicans, maybe not some, one of the crazy Republicans has called for a national divorce where they'll split up America between red and blue states because they just are too different to work together anymore.
Yeah, I to be fair, I think like part of that is like a lack of perspective in terms of like thinking that like this current time frame is so crazy. Like people do, I think, overestimate like how extreme our like political dysfunction and stuff is in like the modern moment.
We're not fighting wars between unions and unionists anymore.
Yeah, like
companies and unions.
We've covered like some pretty crazy happenings in American politics or other countries' politics, that it's just because we compared to like say the 1990s and early 2000s.
One of the most stable times.
And it's like now things are a little bit more heated, and it's like maybe that's almost like just a reversion to the mean, right? But
I think maybe like the other thing, the reason it's in the consciousness so much is this online aspect that didn't exist before, because people feel that it gets present in their life in a way that if you weren't a union member or you weren't a union buster, you probably didn't really care when you read in the news that 30,000 people were just fighting in this battle over unions. But now people just pull out their phone and they see the latest bit of culture war information. So maybe that's
they're not seeing it outside
politics to the way it is, because obviously politics is appealing to average people and what they believe to be their concerns.
Yeah, well, I agree. Like I think the perception is more heated, but the reality is more heated. It's just like when you compare it to other points in time in history, it is important to keep perspective that the heated nature's relative, and it's like not as bad, I think, as it's often portrayed. Like a lot of people like pretend like this is like the cultural moment, say in America, of like, oh, like this is the worst it's ever been in America. Like America's like the most dysfunctional and it's like, I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, because you had times where
you had a civil war. Like
people were busting through doors in Congress and congressmen were threatening other congressmen with knives, and like, yeah, shit got pretty heated back in the day too.
Yeah, I remember you were telling me about how one of would it have been the 60s or 70s where like radical black activists like stormed into a school with guns as a part of like the protesting that they were doing.
Yeah, they took over.
Or something.
I don't remember which university, but there was a radical group on university campus that brought guns and occupied the one of the buildings.
Oh, well, speaking
Like-
of race relations, there was a bombing of a suspected headquarters for the Black Panthers. I think it was a Black Panthers headquarters. Bombed them out of a helicopter, burned down like a couple blocks of a black neighborhood. So that was the police
Christ.
dropping a bomb out of a helicopter. And I think that was the 70s, maybe the early 80s.
Yeah. So yeah, things are like. I think the problem, the thing to be concerned about is like the direction, right? Like the direction of change. Like I think things are getting worse, which is very concerning. But it is still worth considering that things aren't as bad as often as like perceived.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to say is that I think the perception thing is really bleeds over into what we're talking about, because everyone feels like it's so bad because they're always online and always interacting with these things, and it's
Yes. Yeah.
and then that's
100%.
obviously being played on by politicians who are at I want to say in the best case scenario they're just self-interested and they know that's the best way to get votes, and in the worst case scenario they genuinely are also in this super addicted terminally online internet culture, which is probably not for the best.
It kind of reminds me of that. What was that rapper's name who had the cyberbullying quote? It's like, man, just go outside.
Yeah,
Just like turn off the
turn
computer.
off the computer. I've gotten in so much trouble. I've given that advice multiple times, and every time people get so upset with me. They're like, you can't tell people to just turn off the computer. I'm like, I just did. Like, just turn off the computer. Just don't use it. Just turn it off for a week. Turn it off for 2 weeks. Turn it off for a month. Like,
Yeah, and I think that's like good advice for like if you're really wrapped up in like these online community battles, like you're always online, like typing shit, talking people, or like just like go outside, go do something in the real world. It's not nearly as like contentious.
touch grass.
Yeah, as bad as you think. It's pretty good out there.
Yeah, there's a good. I think is it Mitch Hedberg, or it may have been Carlin. It was like one of the old school guys who passed away. One of the old school, or not old school, but one of the older comics, talking about like CNN and Fox. They're just all of these horrible headlines, like death is rampant, societal chaos, blah blah blah. And then he's like, you walk outside, birds are chirping, sun is shining, neighbor waves to you. He's like, where is all this? Like, what are you talking about?
Well, now you go step outside and you wonder where it is, and then you just pull your phone out of your pocket and
There
watch
it is.
TikTok about it. There it is. It's with you everywhere. Americans Canadians have hit the point now too, I believe, where everyone just has unlimited data on their phone, so it's truly never not connected. I was on a trip recently and I have 1 gigabyte of data. I was reminded of how much of a
Poverty-stricken asshole you are.
yeah. I'm like, no, I can't use my phone, and everyone else is just 50 gigs of data. I don't care.
For the best. You won't succumb completely to 4chan.
Oh no, 4chan's an image board. You can use that with any amount of data. That's a fact. It's the YouTubes and the Netflix and all of the TikToks and the Instagrams. That's where you need the data.
All right, do we reach a natural endpoint?
I think so.
That is pretty satisfactory.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Peace.